Good evening and welcome to Monday Night Playhouse. I'm Damiano Pietropaolo and I am here at the Royal George Theatre in Niagara-on-the-Lake, home of the Shaw Festival. I'm here with Artistic Director Jackie Maxwell for the fourth of this season's Bell Canada Reading Series. Hello, Jackie.
Hi, Damiano.
I gather we're waiting for the appearance of a very special guest.
Well, we are indeed. And he's somewhat late, I fear.
You have a full house waiting for him. I hope he's not far away.
Well, Gilbert Keith Chesterton was never known for his predictability.
Ah, yes. GKC, friend and foe of Mr. Bernard Shaw himself.
Very much. Mr. Chesterton was an icon all to himself. A giant, really, in modern literature.
Mm-hmm.
He was an essayist, critic, poet, novelist, social commentator, extremely controversial, like his pal, Bernard Shaw, and very, very funny.
And will he be reading from his own works?
Oh, yes, ably assisted by one of our veteran actors, Mr. Neil Barclay, and it was all put together by Mr. Tony Van Bridge.
One of the Shaw Festival's most revered and senior actors.
Yes, with his own history and contribution to Canadian theatre that is a story in itself.
And maybe destined for radio, too.
Oh, that would be nice.
He really is quite late.
I'm wondering if... wait, I think...
I must apologize for being late. But since I had to give up my seat on the bus to two ladies, I decided to walk. Now, I am firmly of the opinion that I was born on the 29th of May, 1874, on Camden Hill, Kensington, and baptized in the little church of St. George, opposite the large waterworks tower that dominates that ridge. I indignantly deny that the church was chosen because it needed the whole water power of West London to turn me into a Christian. The very first thing I can ever remember seeing with my own eyes was a young man walking across a bridge. He had a curly moustache and an attitude of confidence verging on swagger. He carried in his hand a disproportionately large key of a shining yellow metal, and wore a large golden or gilded crown. The bridge he was crossing on sprang on the one side from the edge of a highly perilous mountain chasm, and at the other end it joined the upper part of the tower of an almost excessively castellated castle. In the castle tower there was one window, out of which a young lady was looking. I cannot remember in the least what she looked like, but I will do battle with anyone who denies her superlative good looks. To those who may object that such a scene is rare in the home life of house agents living immediately to the north of Kensington High Street, I shall be compelled to admit not that the scene was unreal, but that I saw it through a window much more wonderful than the window in the tower. I saw it through the proscenium arch of a toy theatre constructed by my father, and that the young man in the crown was about 6 inches high, and proved on investigation to be made of cardboard. I have no shadow of recollection of what the young man was doing on the bridge, or of what he proposed to do with the key, though a later and wearier knowledge of literature and legend hints to me that he was not improbably going to release the lady from captivity. All the rest is gone. Scenes, subject, story, characters. But that one scene glows in my memory like a glimpse of some incredible paradise. And for all I know, I shall still remember it when all other memory is gone out of my mind. Early impressions count considerably in life. All my life I have loved edges and the boundary lines that bring one thing sharply against another, prosceniums and frames, limits. And I will maintain that the largest wilderness looks larger seen through a window. I've said that the toy theatre was made by my father. It is therefore to him that I owe so much for this first picture of life. My father was the head of a hereditary business of house agents and surveyors, which had already been established for some 3 generations in Kensington. My people belonged to that rather old-fashioned English middle class. And one peculiarity of this middle class was that it really was a class, and it really was in the middle. Both for good and evil, and certainly often to excess, It was separated both from the class above it and the class below. It knew far too little of the working classes, to the grave peril of a later generation. It knew far too little even of its own servants. There was a sort of silence and embarrassment between them. A lady of my family went to live in a friend's house during the friend's absence, to be waited on by a sort of superior servant. Now, the lady had got it fixed in her head that the servant cooked her own meals separately, whereas the servant was equally fixed on the policy of eating what was left over from the lady's meals. Now, the servant sent up for breakfast, say, 5 rashers of bacon, which was more than the lady wanted. But the lady had another fixed freak of conscience, common in the ladies of the period. She thought that nothing should be wasted, and could not see that even a thing consumed is wasted if not wanted. She ate the 5 rashers. The servant consequently sent up 7 rashers. The lady paled a little, but followed the path of duty and ate them all. The servant, beginning to feel that she too would like a little breakfast, sent up 9 or 10 rashers. The lady, rallying all her powers, charged at them with her head down and swept them from the field. And so I suppose it went on, owing to the polite silence between the two social classes. I dare not think how it ended. The logical conclusion would seem to be that the servant starved and the lady burst. There's been frequent calls to refer to my size. On the occasion, for instance, of one of my many encounters with my good friend Mr. George Bernard Shaw, he prodded a finger into this ample and now notorious part of my anatomy and said, "What are you going to call it?" I said, well, if it's a girl, I shall call it Elizabeth. If it's a boy, I shall call it Gilbert Keith. But if it's just wind, I shall call it George Bernard Shaw. And on a similar occasion, I patted Shaw on his non-existent tummy and said, "I see there's been a famine." And he patted me back and said, "Yes, and we can see why, can't we?" But to return to my beginnings, the old middle class really was an educated class. It attached rather too much importance to spelling correctly. It attached enormous importance to speaking correctly, and it did spell and speak correctly. There was a whole world in which nobody was more likely to drop an H than to pick up a title. And this care about education and diction, though I can see much to criticize in it now, did have its good side. It meant my father knew all his English literature backwards, and that I knew a great deal of it by heart long before I could get it into my head. I knew pages of Shakespeare's blank verse without a notion of the meaning of most of it, which is perhaps the right way to begin to appreciate verse. And it's also recorded of me that at the age of 6 or 7 I walked down the street excitedly reciting the words, "Good Hamlet, cast this nighted colour off, and let thine eye look like a friend on Denmark. Do not forever with thy veiled lids seek for thy noble father in the dust." At which appropriate moment I tripped and pitched forward on my nose. I used to say that the account of my own life ought to consist of a series of short stories like those of Sherlock Holmes. Only his were astonishing examples of observation and mine astonishing examples of lack of observation. The tale is told that I once sent a telegram to my wife in London which read, "Am in Market Harborough. Where ought I to be?" I cannot remember whether this story is true, but it's not unlikely, or I think unreasonable. Perhaps it would be the exaggeration of eulogy to call me a tidy person. But I can always pretty satisfactorily account for all my possessions. I can always tell where they are and what I've done with them, so long as I can keep them out of my pockets. If once anything slips into these unknown abysses, I wave it a sad Virgilian farewell. The same presumption applies to the things I dropped into the sea. They tell us that on the last day the sea will give up its dead, and I suppose that on that same occasion long strings of extraordinary things will come running out of my pockets. But I've forgotten what any of them are. A railway ticket. 3rd class, Oxford to London. I'm going to tell you a story. I will not say that this story is true, because as you will soon see, it is all truth and no story. It has no explanation and no conclusion. It is, like most of the other things we encounter in life, a fragment of something else which would be intensely exciting if it were not too large to be seen. My experience was a fragment of this nature, and it is at any rate not fictitious. Not only am I not making up the incidents, what there were of them, but I'm not making up the atmosphere or the landscape, which were the whole horror of the thing. I remember them vividly, and they were truly as I shall now describe. About noon of an ashen autumn day some years ago, I was standing outside the station at Oxford, intending to take the train to London. And for some reason, out of idleness, or the emptiness of my mind, or the emptiness of the pale grey sky, or the cold, a kind of caprice fell upon me that I would not go by that train at all, but would step out on the road and walk at least part of the way to London. Now, I do not know if other people are made like me in this matter, but for me, it's always dreary weather that stings into life a sense of action and romance. On bright blue days, I do not want anything to happen. The world is complete and beautiful, a thing for contemplation. But when the background of a man's life is a grey background, then I desire to paint on it in fire and gore. So the monotonous weather seemed to render unbearable the use of the monotonous train, and I set out into the country lanes out of the town of Oxford. When I had walked for some hours, the evening was closing in. A sickly sunset clung to the horizon, as if pale with reluctance to leave the world in the dark. And as it faded more and more, the skies seemed to come closer and to threaten. The clouds, which had been merely sullen, became swollen. And then they loosened and let down the dark curtains of the rain. The rain was blinding and seemed to beat like blows from an enemy at close quarters. The skies seemed to be bending over and bawling in my ears. I walked on many more miles before I met a man. In that distance, my mind had been made up, and when I met him, I asked him if anywhere in the neighborhood I could pick up the train for London. He directed me to a small, silent station which stood well away from the road and looked as lonely as a hut on the Andes. I do not think I have ever seen such a thing as that station. It looked as if it had been raining there since the creation of the world. The water streamed from the soaking wood of it as if it were not water at all, but some loathsome liquid corruption of the wood itself, as if the solid station were eternally falling to pieces and pouring away in filth. It took me nearly 10 minutes to find a man in the station. When I did, he was a dull one. And when I asked him if there was a train to London, his answer was sleepy and vague. But as far as I could understand him, he said there would be a train in about half an hour. I sat down and lit a cigar and waited, watching the last tail of the tattered sunset and listening to the everlasting rain. It may have been in half an hour or less that a train came rather slowly into the station. It was an unnaturally dark train. I could not see a light anywhere in the long black body of it, and I could not see any guard, so I was reduced to walking up to the engine and calling out to the stoker to ask if the train was going to London. "Well, yes, sir," he said with an unaccountable kind of reluctance. "It's going to London, but..." And even as he spoke, it was just starting, and I jumped into the first carriage. It was pitch dark. I sat there, smoking and wondering, as we steamed through the continually darkening landscape lined with desolate poplars, until he slowed down and stopped irrationally in the middle of a field. I heard a heavy noise, as if someone clambering off the train, and a dark, ragged head suddenly put itself in the window. "Excuse me, sir," said the stoker, "but I think perhaps you ought to know. There's a dead man in this train. I regret to say I expressed myself politely but firmly to the effect that I didn't care so much as long as the train took me to London. But when it had started again with its unknown burden, I did do one thing, and that quite instinctively, without stopping to think. I threw away my cigar, something that is as old as man and has to do with all mourning and ceremonial, told me to do it. There was something unnecessarily horrible, it seemed to me, in the idea of there being only two men in that train, one of them dead and the other smoking a cigar. And as the red and gold of the butt end of it faded like a funeral torch trampled out at some symbolic moment of a procession, I realized the origin and essence of all ritual, that in the presence of these sacred riddles, about which we can say nothing, it is often more decent merely to do something. And I realize that ritual will always mean throwing away something, destroying our corn or wine upon the altar of the gods. When the train panted at last into Paddington Station, I sprang out of it with a newly released curiosity. There was a barrier of officials guarding the rear part of the train. No one was allowed to press towards it. They were guarding and hiding something, perhaps death in some too shocking form, so mixed up with human mystery and wickedness that the law had to give it a sort of sanctity. I went out gladly enough into the streets and saw the lamps shining on the laughing faces. Nor have I ever known, from that day to this, what strange story I had wandered into, or what frightful thing was my companion in the dark. One day, as I was leaving London for a holiday, a friend walked into my flat in Battersea and found me surrounded with half-packed luggage. "You seem to be off on your travels," he said. "Where are you going?" "To Battersea," I replied. "The wit of your remark escapes me," he said. "I am going to Battersea," I repeated, "via Paris, Heidelberg, and Frankfurt." My remark contained no wit, it contained simple truth. I am going to wander over the whole world until once more I find Battersea. Somewhere in the seas of sunset or of sunrise, somewhere in the ancient archipelago of the earth, there is one little island which I wish to find, an island of low green hills and great white cliffs. Travellers tell me that it is called England. Scottish travellers tell me that it is called Britain. And there is a rumour that somewhere in the heart of it there is a beautiful place called Battersea. "I suppose it's unnecessary to tell you that this is Battersea," said my friend with an air of intellectual compassion. "It's quite unnecessary," I said, "and it is spiritually untrue. I cannot see any Battersea here. I cannot see any London or any England. I cannot see that door. I cannot see that chair, because a cloud of sleep and custom has come across my eyes. The only way to go back to them is to go somewhere else. The whole object of travel is not to set foot in foreign lands. It is at last to set foot on one's own country as a foreign land. The only way to go to England is to go away from it." And when after only a month's travelling I did come back to England, I was startled to find that I had told the exact truth. England did break upon me, at once beautifully new and beautifully old. A poem by me. Before the Roman came to Rye, or out to Severn strode, the rolling English drunkard made the rolling English road. A reeling road, a rolling road that rambles round the shire, and after him the parson ran, the sexton and the squire. A merry road, a mazy road, and such as we did tread, the night we went to Birmingham by way of Beachy Head. I knew no harm of Bonaparte and plenty of the squire, and for to fight the Frenchmen I did not much desire. But I did bash their bagonets, because they came arrayed to straighten out the crooked road an English drunkard made, where you and I went down the lane with ale mugs in our hands, the night we went to Glastonbury by way of Goodwin Sands. His sins, they were forgiven him, or why do flowers run behind him? and the hedges all strengthening in the sun. The wild thing went from left to right, and knew not which was which, but the wild rose was above him when they found him in the ditch. God pardon us, nor harden us, we did not see so clear the night we went to Bannockburn by way of Brighton Pier. My friends, we will not go again, nor ape at ancient rage, or stretch the folly of our youth to be the shame of age, but walk with clearer eyes and ears this path that wandereth, and see undrugged in evening light the decent inn of death. For there is good news yet to hear, and fine things to be seen, before we go to paradise by way of Kensal Green. In the early days, it was my fate to wander over many parts of England, delivering what were politely called lectures. There was a considerable appetite for such bleak entertainment, especially in the north of England, and among certain active nonconformist centres, even in the suburbs of London. Oh, with the mention of bleakness, there comes back to me the memory of one particular chapel, lying in the last featureless wastes to the north of London, to which I actually had to make my way through a blinding snowstorm, which I enjoyed very much because I like snowstorms. I was exposed to the elements for nearly 2 hours, and by the time I arrived at the chapel, I must have roughly resembled the snowman the children make in the garden. I proceeded to lecture, God knows on what, and was about to resume my wintry journey when the worthy minister of the chapel, robustly rubbing his hands and slapping his chest and beaming at me with the rich hospitality of Father Christmas, said in a deep, hearty, fruity voice, "Come, Mr. Chesterton, it's a bitter cold night. Do let me offer you an arrowroot biscuit." I assured him gratefully that I felt no such craving. I confess that the thought of returning through the snow and freezing blast for 2 more hours with the glow of that one biscuit within me, and the arrowroot fire running through my veins, struck me as a little out of proportion. I fear it was with considerable pleasure that I crossed the road and entered a public house immediately opposite the chapel, under the very eyes of the nonconformist conscience. Oh, once I was nearly arrested by 2 excited policemen in Yorkshire. I was on holiday. I was engaged in that rich and intricate mass of pleasures which we disguise by the exoteric name of nothing. At the moment in question, I was throwing a big Swedish knife at a tree, practicing that useful trick by which in Stevenson's romances men murder each other. Suddenly, the forest was full of 2 policemen. They asked what the knife was, who I was, why I was throwing it, what my address was, trade, religion, opinion on the Japanese war, name a favorite cat, and so on. They also said I was damaging the tree, which was, I'm sorry to say, not true because I could not hit it. After some half hour's animated conversation, the exhibition of an envelope, an unfinished poem, which was read with great care, and I trust some profit, the elder of the 2 knights became convinced that I really was what I professed to be. That I was a journalist, that I was on the Daily News, that I lived in a particular place, that I was at present stopping with particular people in Yorkshire who happened to be wealthy and well known in the neighbourhood. The policeman acquitted me and let me pass. "But," I said, "what of the mangled tree? It was to the rescue of that tree, once a giant of the forest, now splintered and laid low by the brute superiority of a Swedish knife, that you rushed like knights errant. The facts of which I have just convinced you, that my name is Chesterton, and that I am living with the well-known and philanthropic Mr. Blank of Ilkley, cannot have anything to do with the question of whether I have been guilty of cruelty to vegetables." I made the larger part of this speech to the empty wood, for the 2 policemen had vanished almost as quickly as they had come. It's very possible, of course, that they were elves. In that case, the somewhat illogical character of their view of crime, law, and personal responsibility would find a bright and elvish explanation. Perhaps if I had lingered in the glade till moonrise, I might have seen rings of tiny policemen dancing on the sward, or running about with glowworm lamps, arresting grasshoppers for damaging blades of grass. But taking the bolder hypothesis that they really were policemen, I found myself in a certain difficulty. I was certainly accused of something which was either an offence or was not. I was let off because it was proved I was a guest at a well-known house. The inference seems painfully clear. Either it is not a proof of infamy to throw a knife about in a lonely wood, or else it is a proof of innocence to know a rich man. Some time ago, while I was meditating upon morality, I was, so to speak, snatched up and put in a jury box to try people. I was put into this jury box because I lived in Battersea and my name began with the C. Looking round me, I saw that there were also summoned and in attendance in the courts whole crowds and processions of men, all of whom lived in Battersea and all of whose names began with a C. It seems they always summon jurymen in this sweeping alphabetical way. At one official blow, Battersea is denuded of all its C's and left to get on as best it can with the rest of the alphabet. We settle down with a rollicking ease in our seats, for we are a devil-may-care race, the C's of Battersea. And an oath was administered to us in an almost inaudible manner. We understood, however, that we were to well and truly try the case between our sovereign lord the king and the prisoner at the bar, neither of whom had as yet put in an appearance. Just as I was wondering whether the king and the prisoner were perhaps coming to an amicable understanding in some adjoining public house, the prisoner's head appeared above the barrier of the dock. He was accused of stealing bicycles and was the great image of a good friend of mine. We did well and truly try the case between the king and the prisoner, and we came to the conclusion that the king was in no way implicated. Then we passed on to a woman who had neglected her children, and who looked as if somebody or something had neglected her. Never have I stood so close to pain. And out of this came a curious realization of a political or social truth. I saw with an indescribable kind of clearness what a jury really is and why we must never let it go. The trend of our epoch has been consistently towards specialism and professionalism. We tend to have trained soldiers because they fight better, trained singers because they sing better, trained dancers because they dance better, and so on and so on. And the principle has been applied to law and politics. Now, one of the 4 or 5 paradoxes which should be taught to every infant prattling at his mother's knee is the following: that the more a man looks at a thing, the less he can see it. And the more a man learns a thing, the less he knows it. It is a terrible business to mark out a man for vengeance, but it is a thing to which a man can grow accustomed, as he can to other terrible things. The horrible thing about all legal officials, even the best, about all judges, magistrates, barristers, detectives, and policemen, is not that they're wicked. Some of them are quite good. Not that they're stupid. Several of them are quite intelligent. It's simply that they've got used to it. Strictly, they do not see the prisoner in the dock. All they see is the usual man in the usual place. They do not see their awful court of judgment. They see only their own workshop. Therefore, the instinct of Christian civilization has most wisely declared that into their judgments there shall upon every occasion be infused fresh blood and fresh thoughts from the streets. Men shall come in who can see the court and see the crowd, and the coarse faces of policemen and professional criminals, the wasted faces of the wastrels, the unreal faces of the gesticulating counsel, and see it all as one sees a new picture or a play hitherto unvisited. Our civilization has decided that determining the guilt and innocence of men is a thing too important to be trusted to trained men. It wishes for light upon that awful matter, so it asks men who know no more law than I know, but who can feel the things that I felt in that jury box. When it wants a library catalogued or a solar system discovered or any trifle of that kind, it uses up its specialists. But when it wishes anything done which is really serious, it collects 12 ordinary men. The same thing was done, if I remember correctly, by the founder of Christianity. Another poem. The Donkey. When fishes flew, and forests walked, and figs grew upon thorn, some moment when the moon was blood, then surely I was born. With monstrous head and sickening cry, and ears like errant wings, the devil's walking parody on all four-footed things. The tattered outlaw of the earth, of ancient crooked will. Starve, scourge, deride me. I am dumb, I keep my secret still. Fools, for I also had my hour, one far fierce hour and sweet. There was a shout about my ears, and palms before my feet. When people ask me, or indeed anybody else, why did you join the Church of Rome? The first essential answer, if it is partly an elliptical answer, is to get rid of my sins. For there is no other religious system that does really profess to get rid of people's sins. It's confirmed by the logic, which to many seems startling, by which the Church deduces that sin confessed and adequately repented is actually abolished, and that the sinner does really begin again, as if he had never sinned. And this brought me sharply back to those visions of childhood, the indescribable and indestructible certitude in the soul, that those first years of innocence were the beginning of something worthy, perhaps more worthy than any of the things that actually followed them. I spoke of the strange daylight, which was something more than the light of common day, that still seems in my memory to shine on those steep roads down from Camden Hill, from which one could see the Crystal Palace from afar. Well, when a Catholic comes from confession, he does truly, by definition, step out again into that dawn of his own beginning and look with new eyes across the world to a Crystal Palace that really is of crystal. He believes in the dim corner and in that brief ritual. God has really remade him in his own image. He's now a new experiment of the Creator. He's as much a new experiment as he was when he was 5 years old. He stands, as I said, in the white light at the worthy beginning of the life of a man. The accumulations of time can no longer terrify. He may be grey and gouty, but he is only 5 minutes old. I've sometimes been haunted with a vague story about a wild and fantastic uncle, the enemy of parents and the cause of revolution in the nurseries, who went about preaching a certain theory. I mean, the theory that all the objects which children use at Christmas for what we call riotous or illegitimate purposes were originally created for those purposes, and not for the humdrum household purposes which they now serve. For instance, we will suppose that the story begins with a pillow fight in a night nursery, and boys buffeting and bashing each other with those white and shapeless clubs. The uncle, who would be a professor of immense learning and even greater imagination and inventiveness, would proceed to make himself unpopular with parents and popular with children by proving that the pillow in prehistoric art is obviously designed to be a club. That the sham fight in the night nursery is actually more ancient and authoritative than the whole institution of beds and bedclothes. That in some innocent morning of the world, such cherubim warred on each other with such clouds, possibly made of white samite, mystic, wonderful, and stuffed with feathers from the angels' wings, and that it was only afterwards, when weariness fell upon the world and the young gods had grown tired of their godlike sports, that they slept with their heads upon these weapons. And so, by a gradual dislocation of the whole original purpose of a pillow, it came to be recognized as having its proper place on a bed. Any number of these legends could be launched with ease and grace and general gratification. It would be urged to eagerly assenting little boys that catapults are really older and more majestic than windows. Windows were merely targets set up for catapults. Clear and fragile, that such archaic archers might be rewarded with a crash and sparkle of crystal. That it was only after the oppressive priesthood of the Middle Paleolithic had ruthlessly suppressed the catapult culture that people had gradually come to use the now useless glass targets for purposes of light and ventilation. Similarly, butter was originally used solely for the purpose of making butter slides in the paths of parents and guardians. And it was only by a late accident in the life of some prominent though prostrate citizen who happened to lick the pavement that its edible qualities were discovered. True, I cannot set forth here in any great detail any actual proofs of these prehistoric origins, but it seems to me we have as much right to imagine cheerful origins as, for instance, Dr. Freud has to imagine gloomy ones. And we beg to announce with the same authority that everything began with a celestial pillow fight of cherubs, and that the whole world was made entirely for the games of children. Mentioning an uncle is enough to recall even wider memories. One of my first is playing in the garden under the care of a girl with ropes of golden hair, to whom my mother called out from the house, "You are an angel," which I was disposed to accept without metaphor. She's now living in Vancouver as Mrs. Kidd. I was once interviewed on one of those programs on the wireless in which the person being interrogated was asked a series of standard questions, which was the following. If you were marooned on a desert island, which book would you most like to have with you? Naturally, many who were asked this question answered it variously. Some said Shakespeare, Milton, Dickens, and so on. Not a few said the Bible. I must confess I took a different view of this matter, and I said that should I find myself under such circumstances, the book I would most like to have with me would be Thomson's Guide to Practical Boat Building. There was another time when I was asked what I thought of Mr. George Bernard Shaw. I had no difficulty in answering that I thought of Mr. George Bernard Shaw very much as I had always thought of him. I actually wrote a book about him in the ancient days, and I'm happy to say that he reviewed it himself. With the typical opening, "This is the best work of literary art that I have yet provoked." I was destined to see some of Shaw's skylarking on one occasion, and to be privileged to play the fool with him far from the political platform, if not so very far from the theatrical stage. It began by Bernard Shaw coming to my house in Beaconsfield in the heartiest spirits and proposing that we should appear together disguised as cowboys in a film of some sort projected by Sir James Barrie. I will not describe the purpose or character of the performance because nobody ever discovered it, with the exception presumably of Sir James. But throughout the proceedings, even Barrie had the appearance of concealing his secret from himself. All I could gather was that two other well-known persons, Lord Howard de Walden and Mr. William Archer, the grave Scottish critic and translator of Ibsen, had also consented to be cowboys. "Well," I said, after a somewhat blank pause of reflection, God forbid that anyone should say that I could not see a joke if Mr. William Archer could see it. Then, after a pause, I asked, "But what is the joke?" Shaw replied with hilarious vagueness that nobody knew what the joke was. That was the joke. The mysterious proceeding divided itself into two parts. One consisted of an appointment in a sort of abandoned brickfield somewhere in the wilds of Essex, in which spot, it was alleged, our cow-punching costumes were already concealed. The other consisted of an invitation to supper at the Savoy to talk things over with Barry and Granville Barker. I kept both these melodramatic assignations, and though neither of them threw any light upon what we were supposed to be doing, they were both very amusing in their way, and rather different from what one might have expected. We went down to the wasteland in Essex, and found our Wild West equipment. But considerable indignation was felt against William Archer, who, with true Scottish foresight, arrived there first and put on the best pair of trousers. They were indeed a magnificent pair of fur. Riders of the prairie had to be content with canvas trousers. A running commentary upon this piece of individualism continued throughout the afternoon, while we were being rolled in barrels, roped over fake precipices, and eventually turned loose in a field to lasso wild ponies, which were so tame that they ran after us instead of our running after them, and nosed in our pockets for pieces of sugar. Whatever may be the strain on credulity, it's also a fact that we all got onto the same motor bicycle, the wheels of which were spun round under us to produce the illusion of hurtling like a thunderbolt down the mountain pass. When the rest finally clinging to the rope, they left me behind as a necessary weight to secure it. And Granville Barker kept calling out to me to register self-sacrifice and register resignation, which I did with such wild and sweeping gestures as occurred to me, not, I am proud to say, without general applause. Now, about this time, Barry, with his little figure behind his large pipe, was standing about in an impenetrable manner, and nothing could extract from him the faintest indication of why we were being put through these ordeals. It was as if the smoke that rose from that pipe was a vapor not only of magic, but of black magic. But the other half of the mystery was, if possible, more mysterious. It was all the more mysterious because it was public, not to say crowded. I went to the Savoy supper under the impression that Barry and Barker would explain to a small party some small part of the scheme. Instead of that, I found the stage of the Savoy Theatre thronged with nearly everybody in London, as the society papers say when they mean everybody in society. From the Prime Minister, Mr. Asquith, to the most cryptic Oriental attaché, they were all there dining at little tables and talking about everything but the matter at hand. At least, they were all there except Sir James Barry, who on this occasion made himself almost completely invisible. Towards the end of the meal, Sir Edward Elgar casually remarked to my wife, "I suppose you know you're being filmed all this time." From what I know of my wife, it's unlikely that she was brandishing a champagne bottle or otherwise attracting social attention. But some of them were throwing bread about and showing marked relaxation from the cares of state. Then the original four, whom destiny had selected for a wild western life, were approached with private instructions, which worked out in public as follows. The stage was cleared, and the company adjourned to the auditorium, where Bernard Shaw harangued them in a furious speech with savage gesticulations, denouncing Barry, and finally drawing a sword. The other three of us rose at this signal, also brandishing swords, and stormed the stage, going out through the back scenery. And there we, whoever we were, disappear forever from the record and reasonable understanding of mankind. For never from that day to this has the faintest light been thrown on the reasons for our remarkable behavior. I have since heard in a remote and roundabout way a certain vague suggestion to the effect that there was some symbolical notion of our vanishing from real life and being captured or caught up in the film world of romance. being engaged through all the rest of the play in struggling to fight our way back to reality. Whether this was the idea, I have never known for certain. I only know that I received immediately afterwards a friendly and apologetic note from Sir James Barry saying that the whole scheme was going to be dropped. I do not know, but I have often wondered, and have sometimes fancied that there was another sense, darker than my own fancy, in which the secret put in Barry's pipe had ended in smoke. There had really been a sort of unearthly unreality in all the levity of those last hours, like something high and shrill that might crack. And it did crack. I've sometimes wondered whether it was felt that this fantasy of fashionable London would appear incongruous with something that happened some days later. For what happened then was that a certain ultimatum went out from the Austrian government against Serbia. I rang up Maurice Baring at a further stage of that rapidly developing business, and I can remember the tones of his voice when he said, "We've got to fight. They've all got to fight. I don't see how anybody can help it." If the cowboys were struggling to find the road back to reality, they found it all right. The aim of life is appreciation. There's no sense in not appreciating things. And there's no sense in having more of them if you have less appreciation of them. I once said that a Cockney lamppost painted pea green was better than no light or no life, and that if it was a lonely lamppost, we might really see its light better against the background of the dark. The modern millionaire comes bustling along the street to tell me he is an optimist and has 2,005,000 new lampposts, already painted not a Victorian pea green, but a futuristic chrome yellow and electric blue, and that he will plant them over the whole world in such numbers that nobody will notice them, especially as they will all look exactly the same. And I cannot quite see what the optimist has got to be optimistic about. A lamppost can be significant, although it is ugly. But he's not making lampposts significant, he's making them insignificant. In short, as it seems to me, it matters very little whether a man is discontented if his discontent paralyzes his power of appreciating what he has got. The real difficulty of man is not to enjoy lampposts or landscapes, not to enjoy dandelions or chops, but to enjoy enjoyment, to keep the capacity of really liking what he likes. That is the practical problem which the philosopher has to solve. And it seemed to me at the beginning, as it seems to me now in the end, that the pessimists and optimists of the modern world have alike missed and muddled the matter through leaving out the ancient conception of humility and the thanks of the unworthy. And as I begin to believe more and more that a clue was to be found in such principles, even if it was a paradox, I was more and more disposed to seek out those who specialized in humility, though for them it was the door of heaven, and for me the door of earth. For me, my end is my beginning. And this overwhelming conviction that there is one key which can unlock all doors brings me back to my first glimpse of the glorious gift of the senses and the sensational experience of sensation. And there starts up again before me, standing sharp and clear as in old, the figure of a man who crosses a bridge and who carries a key, as I saw him when I first looked into fairyland through the window of my father's toy theatre. Thank you, and good day.
You've been listening to GKC by Tony Van Bridge, the last in this year's Bell Canada Reading Series from the Shaw Festival. It was based on the writings of G.K. Chesterton and adapted and directed by Christopher Newton and Tony Van Bridge. In the part of Gilbert Keith Chesterton, you heard Neil Barclay. The Bell Canada Reading Series is recorded live at the Royal George Theatre in Niagara-on-the-Lake, Ontario, with special thanks going to Bill Talbot, Jim Smagata, and Christine Oakey. The recording engineer was Joe Mahoney, and the producer of the Bell Canada Reading Series is Barbara Worthy. That's it for tonight.
We present The Blue Cross, adapted by John Scotney, with Andrew Sachs as Father Brown.
Harwich and Parkson Docks and Harbour Board Quay number 5, no admittance except on authorised business.
Well, that's us, sir.
This can't be the one. There's no one about.
No, there wouldn't be, not in this rain.
No, I mean a big passenger ferry. There'd be customs, porters, people milling about.
We are very late, Inspector.
Thank you, Sergeant. How was I to know there were 2 flipping harbours at Harwich?
Look, sir.
What?
There's someone.
Where?
There with the parcels. And the umbrella.
That is a Catholic priest, Sergeant, and therefore almost certainly a foreigner. Anyhow, he looks as lost as we are. Still, there's no harm in trying. Excusez, vous, monsieur, excusez-moi.
Oh, no.
May...
Pardonnez-me, monsieur. That is, parliamo l'italiano.
Oh, God, what's Italian? You speak English?
English?
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am English. I thought you were French. Well, now, look, in that case, I wonder if you
I'm
could
sorry,
tell
I'm sorry.
me-
So we're in a hurry. Do you know where we can find the ferry boat from Holland? We've got to meet someone off it.
Well, yes, indeed. Now, you see that green funnel?
Green funnel, yes.
Over the shed there?
Yes.
Well, that's it.
Oh, right. Thank
Oh,
you.
but I'm afraid you've missed your friend.
What do you mean?
You see, I think... no, I'm certain I was the last one off. We docked an hour ago.
An hour ago?
Oh, yes, it's very quick nowadays. Unlike the last time I came back from Rome this way, it was...
yes.
Well, it must have been 10 years ago. Queen Victoria's Diamond Jubilee in 1897.
Yes, and
And
the next thing you know, we'll all be going by flying machine. Right,
Pardon?
now, look, we better get to the train station quick. Come on, Sergeant. Oh, thank you very
Train
much.
station. I was going to go to
Hurry up, please. Hurry along there.
Is this the boat train, Porter?
Yes, sir. Hurry up, though. It's going in a few minutes.
Oh, right. Well, we'd better get on the train and hope our man's on it.
Half a mo, Inspector. Isn't this him? Here, by the ticket barrier. He fits the description. Boater, blazer, black beard.
Yes, right, you are, yes. Excuse me, sir. Are you Monsieur Valentin? Monsieur Aristide Valentin?
I am.
Ah, I am Inspector Bagshaw of Scotland Yard. I've got my card here. Somewhere or other. This is Sergeant... what did I do with my card?
Inspector Bagshaw, you are extremely late.
Oh.
Fortunately, I managed to be the first off the boat and have been checking the passager. He has not passed.
Who exactly looking for, sir? Commissioner?
Not Commissioner, Prefect of Police, or to my men, Chef.
Chef, sir?
In France, it does not mean cook, Sergeant. No, the man is called Flambeau.
Flambeau?
It means the torch.
I knew that, yes.
His real name, they say, is Duroc. Maybe he has many names. He is a colossus of crime. Indeed, in the Paris underworld, he is all-powerful. I follow him from Paris to Gand to Brussels to Roland.
Yeah.
I am certain he is on the paquebot.
Oh, definitely.
All night, all morning, I search the passager. Nothing. But he is a master of disguise, this one.
Any particular disguise, sir?
Anything, Sergeant. Once he disguised himself as a postbox.
Sir?
Well, to be exact, he set up a false postbox and hid behind it to await a particular letter. Mostly, though, he is a priest.
Priest, of course.
It is said he once studied for the priesthood.
That priest we saw with the umbrella and the
Hang
parasol.
on, sir. That priest we saw.
I just said that, Sergeant.
No, sir. Look.
What?
Here he comes now. Through the entrance.
Strike me. Grab him. Arrêtez-vous. Arrêtez. Two trains.
Oh, dear. What is it?
Oh, don't speak French, eh? Don't you, Monsieur Flambeau? Pick up that parcel, Sergeant, and watch out. It looks like a gunfight.
Be careful, please.
I've got it. No, sir. No, it's a crosser.
This man cannot be Flambeau. He is somewhat on the short side, and Flambeau is somewhat more than 2 meters, over 6'4". And he is a magnificent athlete, almost an acrobat. While this gentleman...
Yes, I'm very sorry, Your Reverence.
Oh, no, please. It's quite all right.
What is this, Father? This cross? May I?
Oh, yes, please do.
Magnifique. Romanesque work. What, about 1160?
Yes.
The silver is worked so, and the stones. See, Sergeant, they must be sapphires. Uncut sapphires.
Nicked, is it?
Uncut. North French work?
Oh, yes. Yes, you see, it was supposed to have belonged to the Blessed St. Thomas.
Aquinas.
No, Becket. English martyr, you know.
Yes.
And as I was coming back to work in London, I was asked to bring it from the papal treasury. It's for the exhibition in Canterbury. You may have seen the advertisement in the Catholic Times. Oh, yes.
Here, Father, you must take care of it.
Thank you.
It is valuable.
Yes, thank you.
These are, you say, precious stones.
Oh, precious, oh. Yes, well, that would be the word, precious. Yes, now, my train, you must excuse me. Thank you. Goodbye.
Au revoir.
Thank you.
Bon voyage,
Father.
Well, that's it, I suppose.
Hey, wait a minute, sir. Weren't we supposed to get that train?
Was that the London train?
Mouth.
Oh, no. Porter,
Yes, sir.
when's the next London train?
One in half an hour, sir. But it's rather slow, I'm afraid.
Oh, yes, it would be.
Inspector, have you a cup?
Now, Porter, did you notice a very tall gentleman getting on the train dressed as a priest?
Or a postman?
Sergeant.
Sorry, sir, a priest?
Yes.
No, that gentleman's the only priest I saw. No, the only tall man was one of the sailors. Now, he really was tall.
What? But I was the first from the boat. Why did I not see him?
Ah, you might have been the first passenger, sir. But any crew members who want to go to London, we always let them on the train early. Keeps them out of the bars, you see.
Why did I not think of the crew? Fool, I was on a ship. Yeah. So it has sailors.
One minute, Porter. That train is direct to London non-stop, is it?
Yes, sir.
Good. Where is your telegraph office?
Just at the end of the platform, sir. There, you can see it.
Right. I'm going to telegraph the railway police at Liverpool Street to tell them to hold that tall sailor.
At last, Liverpool Street Station. He was right about it being slow, that porter.
It is very flat, your East Anglia.
Well, we'll soon know if they got him. Oh, no. No!
Oh, what is it?
Oh, what shall we do
Yes,
with it?
all right, thank you, Sergeant.
That must be the whole crew that constable's got there. They don't look very cheerful, do they, Inspector?
Constable?
Yes, sir.
I'm Inspector Bagshaw.
All present and correct, sir.
What on earth is going on here? I only wanted one sailor, not all of them.
Yes, sir. Well, we weren't quite sure which one you wanted, sir, so we thought it best to hold them all. I mean, none of them exactly fit your description. I mean, they're none of them what you'd call tall, are they?
No.
Sir.
Did any tall man get off that train?
No, sir. Well, I'll tell a lie. There was one very tall gentleman, but he wouldn't be. You won't believe this, sir, but he was a Roman Catholic priest.
Tell me about this priest.
Well, it was funny. Ridiculous, really. He was, like I said, very tall, and with him was this short, plump, little priest. Frankly, sir, I think the short one was a bit,
Simple.
Yeah. He got into a terrible muddle with this brown paper parcel and his big umbrella. He dropped one parcel looking for his ticket. Worried him, it did. He burst open. And this
Blue cross in it.
Yes, sir. That's when the tall one appeared and came to the little one's aid. A nice gentleman, French, I think. They went off together. I didn't see which way they... Oh.
He changed.
On the train.
Before...
You can dismiss your naval review, Constable.
Yes, sir. Move along there.
I think I need a nice cup of tea. Monsieur Valentin?
Tea? No.
But perhaps a cup of coffee?
There's a tea room in the railway hotel, sir.
Yes, very well, Sergeant. Lead the way.
One black coffee and one large pot of tea.
Yes, thank you.
This is terrible, absolutely terrible.
Are you all right, sir?
Oh, don't worry, Sergeant. They're very emotional, the Latins. I'll handle this. Come now, Monsieur Valentin. We'll find him. The Metropolitan Police, finest police force in West...
Find him? Who? Flambeau? Oh, he's always escaping. No. I was complaining it was the coffee. In France, they warned me about English coffee, but this is unbelievable. I put sugar in, it still tastes awful.
Well, sir, you should have had tea. When in Rome, warm the pot, let it stand 3 minutes, put the milk in first, and now the tea... Finally, exactly 1½ teaspoonfuls of sugar. Stir. And, cheers. Oh, it's terrible, absolutely terrible. It's poisoned.
I don't think so. When you were putting the sugar in, I noticed... Waiter!
Sir?
I want you to taste the sugar in that bowl.
Sir?
Go on, taste it.
Salt. It's salt. I'm most terribly sorry, gentlemen. May I just check? Yes, yes. There's sugar in the salt cellar.
Oh, well, I demand to know who's responsible.
You know, I do believe it must have been those two clergymen. The ones that threw soup at the wall.
Threw soup at the wall?
Yes, sir. You can see the mark over there. They came in earlier and had coffee. Both very quiet, respectable people. One paid the bill, and the other one dragged behind, and suddenly he threw some soup from a half-empty cup against the wall. And the funny thing was, one was very tall, and the other was very short and rubbish, and he carried a big umbrella and some brown paper parcels. Yes, sir, exactly. Do you know them?
And it was the tall one who threw the soup.
No, sir, the short one. I went after them. They were too far off, though. I could just see them in the distance going round the corner into Carstairs.
Carstairs Street.
Out the front, right and then left. I know this.
Yes, Sergeant.
Keep the change.
Thank you very much, sir.
Get your pairs here.
Carstairs Street. But they must have left half an hour ago.
Somewhere a man must begin. Look carefully. Who knows? Perhaps some oddity that might have caught the eye of the pursued might also catch the eye of the pursued.
Speaking of oddities, sir, look at this greengrocer's store.
Lovely apples.
See, best tangerine oranges, 2 a penny. Finest Brazils, 4p a pound.
Yes, they are expensive, Sergeant, but I confess I don't see the relevance.
But, sir, the price tickets for the oranges has been put on the nuts, and the one for the nuts substituted for the ticket for the oranges.
And where have we met this highly subtle form of humour before? Excuse me, my good man.
Yeah?
There are 2 price tickets wrongly placed on your store. I ask, is there some connection between these nuts and oranges? And 2 clergymen, one tall, the other short?
What? Oh, I didn't notice that. There. As for those clergymen, I don't know what you got to do with them, but if you're one of their friends, you can tell the short one I'll knock his block off if he upsets my apples again.
Yes, I'm Inspector Bagshaw. Here, my card. Where is it? And never mind. What's this about upsetting your apples?
It's not a police matter, Inspector. Huh? If you ask me, that little parson was drunk. He knocked over all my apples.
Did you see which way they went?
Sergeant,
yeah, they
excuse me,
did you... yellow horse omnibuses over there. They must go to Hampstead. It was just leaving, that's why I didn't catch them.
And so, shall we take one of those buses?
Well...
Come on, Inspector.
Wouldn't it be better to take the motor taxi, sir? It's 4 times as quick. Besides, I've never been in a...
That's right. If only we knew where we are going. If you know where a man is going, get in front of him. But if you want to guess what he's doing, keep behind him. Here, we'll go upstairs. I'm afraid it's not the time of year for an open bus stop. I'm sorry. All we can do is to keep our eyes skinned for some strange thing.
What sort of strange thing, sir?
Any sort of strange thing.
Wake up, Inspector. I'm sorry, I dozed off it. Oh, it's bitter, a little bit. Cold one tonight.
We will have, I think, very soon one of your famous London fogs.
Yes.
This journey seems to have lasted for hours. That last place, the draggled taverns, the dreary scrubs, it seemed it was the end of the universe.
No, sir, Camden Town. Look, they're lighting the gas. 5 and 20 to 5. Oh, yes. The nights really are drawing in now, what with the fog in the dark. We won't be able to see a thing soon.
It's all right.
Look there! That restaurant place where the lights were lit. Our cue at last. The broken window. Stop the bus driver. Sir?
Si, senor, si. See, it was the padre. He broke my window.
The short one.
See. He and his friends, they had tea here. After they're leaving, I find the big one pay 6-7 times too much. I call up to the other priest, he come back, I pick up the bill to show him, and madre mia, I could have sworn I put 1 shilling and 6pence on the bill, but there was 11 shillings and 6pence. Now the small priest, he say, I am sorry to confuse your accounts, but the extra 10 shillings will pay for the window. What window, I say? The one I am going to break, he say, and he push his umbrella through the glass. He marched to join his friends, and they go so quick up to Bullock Street. I went on, but it did not seem worthwhile to follow. And the other one, he was a priest, but he was a very big man.
Thank you, Signor Gabrielli. Bullock Street. It's here. No, Bullock Street is here.
Bullock Street?
Yes, Bullock Street, yes.
Well,
there we are.
This is it. Bullock Street. Dead as a dodo.
Yes, well, what do we do now? I am flummoxed. I think it's time for another of your brilliant intuitions, sir.
I'm afraid, Inspector, I too am flummoxed.
In that case, gentlemen, might I suggest that we try more routine police methods?
Huh?
We could make inquiries.
How so?
Well, we could ask in this shop here.
Yes. Well, it's a good idea, Sergeant. Yes. Good thinking. Well, now, leave this to me.
Can I help you, gentlemen?
Yes, good evening, madam. We are police officers. Here is my show the lady your warrant card, Sergeant.
Here it is.
Now, in pursuit of...
If you come about the parcel, I sent it off already.
Parcel?
I mean the parcel the gentleman left. The clergyman.
2 clergymen?
Yes, sir. These 2 clergymen, they came in about 20 minutes ago.
Yes, and then what, yes?
They bought some peppermints.
Bought some...
Anyway, a few minutes later, one of them came back. Have I left a parcel? Well,
Yes.
I looked everywhere, but I couldn't see one. So he says, never mind, but if it should turn up, please post it to this address. And he left me the address and a shilling for my trouble.
Well,
sure enough. I thought I'd looked everywhere, but I found he had left a brown paper parcel. So I posted it, somewhere in Canterbury. But as the thing seemed so important, I thought perhaps you police had come about it.
So we have. Have you any idea which way they went, the clergymen?
Oh, yes, sir. The one that came back. I should think he was up from the country, a bit slow, you know.
Yes, a bit simple.
He asked me the way to Hampstead Heath. Straight up there, I said. But you want to be careful, what with the dark and this fog.
And the rain.
Yes, I must, he said. Got me to draw him a map, show him the best way across. Then he dashed off and forgot it. Oh, look, here it is. Oh, that's funny. I don't remember that cross on it. You see that little cross?
Extraordinaire.
That is funny.
Yes, it is. Thank you. You have been most helpful.
I'll take the map, if I may, madam. Thank you. Good night. Oh, it's a tall, isn't it? Hampstead Heath on a night like this. Oh, look at the fog now. What a pea souper. Well, what do you think, sir?
It's obvious Flambeau sees the sapphire cross when the priest drops it. What an opportunity. He is disguised as a priest. Quite naturally, he falls into conversation with his brother priest. Flambeau does not know London, but he knows Hampstead Heath is one of the very few empty places in this crowded city.
A place where he can get the priest on his own and commit the robbery without attracting attention.
Precisely.
That's good point, sir.
He lures the priest here. A man like Flambeau could lead that gullible, innocent little simpleton by the nose to the North Pole if he wanted to.
Yes, that's all very well, but I still don't understand. The soup on the wallpaper, the apples, the broken window.
And what about the cross on the map?
The cross! We must make a way to the place marked at once.
Charge the church with lowering reason, but it's just the other
Look,
way. I'm afraid
there they are, there, on the bench. You can just make them out through the fog.
Exactly the spot marked on the map.
Exactly.
Yes.
We'll creep up on them.
These modern infidels appeal to reason. But who can look at those millions of stars and not feel that there may well be wonderful universes above us where reason is utterly unreasonable?
No, reason is always reasonable.
And alone on earth, the Church makes reason really supreme. Alone on earth, the Church affirms that God himself is bound by reason.
Yet who knows if in that infinite universe
No. Reason and justice grip the remotest and the loneliest star. You can imagine any mad botany or geology you please. Think of forests of adamant with leaves of brilliance. Think the moon as a blue moon, a single elephantine sapphire. But don't fancy that all that frantic astronomy would make the smallest difference to the reason and justice of conduct. On plains of opal, under cliffs cut out of pearl, you would still find a notice board, "Thou shalt not steal."
So, you know, little priest. Well then, you had better hand over the sapphire cross.
No.
We are all alone here. I could pull you to pieces like a straw doll.
I'm sure you could, but you see, I don't have it. I left it behind in the sweet shop. Eh? You remember I went back to ask if I'd left a parcel? Well, I hadn't, but I did then, if you see what I mean.
I don't believe you. Give me those parcels.
Ça suffit, Flambeau. Pour les mains. J'ai un pistolet.
Sacré nom d'ami. Valentin, qu'est-ce que vous faites ici?
Right, stay where you are, both of you.
Well, my little bumpkin. It seems you are remarkably fortunate. Who could have expected the head of the Paris police here?
Well, as a matter of fact, I rather expected him.
Put away that gun, will you, Monsieur Valentin? Please, that's not our way in this country.
What do you mean you expected me, father?
Well, I recognized you from the newspaper, so I realized you must be pursuing someone. And then this gentleman... Only I wasn't sure, and it would never do to make a scandal against one of our own clergy. I had to test you, Monsieur Flambeau.
Pardon?
Is a man generally makes a small scene if he finds salt in his coffee? If he doesn't, he has some reason for keeping quiet. I changed the salt and sugar. You kept quiet. Yes. A man usually objects if his bill is 6 times too large. If he pays it, he has some motive for being unnoticed. I altered the bill. You paid.
And what about the soup and the apples? The window?
Ah, well, Mr. Flambeau would not leave any tracks for you to follow, so somebody had to. But, as a matter of fact, another part of my trade, too, made me sure you weren't a priest.
What?
You attacked reason. That's bad theology.
Priest, I salute you. And now, monsieur, adieu. Tally ho!
Sergeant! What a jump!
I'll bring him down.
No gunplay. Sergeant, go that way. I'll go this way. Valentin, you stay there.
Fools! I had him in my... Still, after all, perhaps I could not wish to have shot the famous Flambeau.
Oh.
Tell me, priest, what made you suspect him?
Oh, well, there was a little bulge up the sleeve of his cassock. Ah, I thought the spiked bracelet.
Oh, Dieu. Oh, la. How indulgerous. Did you ever hear of this spiked bracelet?
Oh, one's little flock, you know. Well, when I was a curate in Hartlepool, there were 3 of them with spiked bracelets. Yes. You know, a man who spends half his time hearing confession is unlikely to be unaware. Yes, perhaps it's you, police, who are the more innocent. Your duty is to arraign men in the public court before a judge. Mine is to absolve them in the sealed secrecy of the confessional before the highest judge of all. And naturally, they conceal their evil deeds from you. To me, they tell them. Ah, here's the inspector. Oh, are you hurt? Are you hurt, Inspector?
Twisted my ankle.
Oh,
just sit down.
Yes, please, yes. Sit down.
Oh, that's better. Oh, this fog. We'll never get him now. Sir, I'll have to make a report on this. I'll need your name.
Well, yes, of course.
No, but
it's Brown.
Where's my name?
J. Brown. It's Father Brown. Of course, I suppose that's...
Damn it.
I say...
What?
Have you... Well, I seem to have... Look, my umbrella.
Well, I can't find my notebook. Can I borrow your notebook?
In The Blue Cross by G.K. Chesterton, the part of Father Brown was played by Andrew Sachs. Flambeau, Olivier Pierre. Bagshaw, Bill Wallace. Sergeant, Alan Thompson. Lady shopkeeper, Ellen McIntosh. Restaurateur, Trader Faulkner. Valentin, John Abineri. Constable, Trevor Nichols. Porter, Graham Blocky. Waiter, Robin Summers. The Blue Cross was adapted by John Scotney and directed in Bristol by Alec Reed.
The Ballad of the White Horse. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, July 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. Prefatory Note and Dedication. Prefatory Note to the First Edition. This ballad needs no historical notes, for the simple reason that it does not profess to be historical. All of it that is not frankly fictitious, as in any prose romance about the past, is meant to emphasize tradition rather than history. King Alfred is not a legend in the sense that King Arthur may be a legend, that is, in the sense that he may possibly be a lie. But King Alfred is a legend in this broader and more human sense, that the legends are the most important things about him. The cult of Alfred was a popular cult, from the darkness of the 9th century to the deepening twilight of the 20th. It is wholly as a popular legend that I deal with him here. I write as one ignorant of everything, except that I have found the legend of a king of Wessex still alive in the land. I will give 3 curt cases of what I mean. A tradition connects the ultimate victory of Alfred with the valley in Berkshire called the Vale of the White Horse. I have seen doubts of the tradition, which may be valid doubts. I do not know when or where the story started. It is enough that it started somewhere and ended with me, for I only seek to write upon a hearsay, as the old balladists did. For the second case, there is a popular tale that Alfred played the harp and sang in the Danish camp. I select it because it is a popular tale, at whatever time it arose. For the third case, there is a popular tale that Alfred came in contact with a woman and cakes. I select it because it is a popular tale, because it is a vulgar one. It has been disputed by grave historians, who were, I think, a little too grave to be good judges of it. The 2 chief charges against the story are that it was first recorded long after Alfred's death, and that, as Mr. Oman urges, Alfred never really wandered all alone without any thanes or soldiers. Both these objections might possibly be met. It has taken us nearly as long to learn the whole truth about Byron, and perhaps longer to learn the whole truth about Pepys, than elapsed between Alfred and the first writing of such tales. As for the other objection, do the historians really think that Alfred after Wilton, or Napoleon after Leipzig, never walked about in a wood by himself for the matter of an hour or 2? 10 minutes might be made sufficient for the essence of the story. But I am not concerned to prove the truth of these popular traditions. It is enough for me to maintain 2 things: that they are popular traditions, and that without these popular traditions we should have bothered about Alfred about as much as we bother about Edwig. One other consideration needs a note. Alfred has come down to us in the best way, that is by national legends, solely for the same reason as Arthur and Roland and the other giants of that darkness, because he fought for the Christian civilization against the heathen nihilism. But since this work was really done by generation after generation, by the Romans before they withdrew, and by the Britons while they remained, I have summarized this first crusade in a triple symbol, and given to a fictitious Roman, Celt part in the glory of Ethandune. I fancy that in fact Alfred's Wessex was of very mixed bloods, but in any case it is the chief value of legend to mix up the centuries while preserving the sentiment, to see all ages in a sort of splendid foreshortening. That is the use of tradition. It telescopes history. GKC. End of prefatory note. Dedication. To my wife. Of great limbs gone to chaos, a great face turned to night, why bend above a shapeless shroud, seeking in such archaic cloud sight of strong lords and light? Where 7 sunken Englands lie buried one by one, why should one idle spade, I wonder, shake up the dust of thanes like thunder, to smoke and choke the sun? In cloud of clay so cast to heaven, what shape shall man discern? These lords may light the mystery of mastery or victory, and these ride high in history, but these shall not return. Gored on the Norman gonfalon, the golden dragon died. We shall not wake with ballad strings the good time of the smaller things. We shall not see the holy kings ride down by Severn side. Stiff, strange, and quaintly coloured as the broidery of Bayeux, the England of that dawn remains, and this of Alfred and the Danes seems like the tales a whole tribe feigns too English to be true. Of a good king on an island, that ruled once on a time, and as he walked by an apple tree, there came green devils out of the sea, with sea plants trailing heavily, and tracks of opal slime. Yet Alfred is no fairy tale. His days as our days ran. He also looked forth for an hour on peopled plains and skies that lower from those few windows in the tower that is the head of a man. But who shall look from Alfred's hood, or breathe his breath alive? His century, like a small dark cloud, drifts far. It is an eyeless crowd, where the tortured trumpets scream aloud, and the dense arrows drive. Lady, by one light only, we look from Alfred's eyes. We know he saw athwart the wreck the sign that hangs about your neck, where one more than Melchizedek is dead and never dies. Therefore I bring these rhymes to you, who brought the cross to me, since on you flaming without flaw I saw the sign that Guthrum saw, when he let break his ships of awe, and laid peace on the sea. Do you remember we went under a dragon moon, and mid volcanic tints of night walked where they fought the unknown fight, and saw black trees on the battle height, black thorn on Ethandune? And I thought, I will go with you, as man with God has gone, and wander with a wandering star, the wandering heart of things that are, the fiery cross of love and war, that like yourself goes on. O go you onward, where you are shall honour and laughter be, past purpled forest and pearled foam, God's winged pavilion free to roam, your face, that is a wandering home, a flying home for me. Ride through the silent earthquake lands, wide as a waste is wide, across these days like deserts when pride and a little scratching pen have dried and split the hearts of men, heart of the heroes ride. Up through an empty house of stars, being what heart you are, up the inhuman steeps of space, as on a staircase go in grace, carrying the firelight on your face beyond the loneliest star. Take these, in memory of the hour we strayed a space from home, and saw the smoke-hued hamlets quaint with westland, and watched the western glory faint along the road to Frome. GKC. End of dedication. The Ballad of the White Horse, Book 1. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, August 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. Book 1. The Vision of the King. Before the gods that made the gods had seen their sunrise pass, the white horse of the White Horse Vale was cut out of the grass. Before the gods that made the gods had drunk at dawn their fill, the white horse of the White Horse Vale was hoary on the hill. Age beyond age on British lands, eons on eons gone, was peace and war in western hills, and the white horse looked on. For the white horse knew England when there was none to know. He saw the first oar break or bend. He saw heaven fall and the world end. O God, how long ago! For the end of the world was long ago, and all we dwell today as children of some second birth, like a strange people left on earth after a judgment day. For the end of the world was long ago, when the ends of the world waxed free, when Rome was sunk in a waste of slaves, and the sun drowned in the sea. When Caesar's son fell out of the sky, and whoso hearkened right could only hear the plunging of the nations in the night. When the ends of the earth came marching in to torch and cresset gleam, and the roads of the world that lead to Rome were filled with faces that moved like foam, like faces in a dream. And men rode out of the eastern lands, broad river and burning plain, trees that are Titan flowers to see, and tiger skies striped horribly with tints of tropic rain, where Ind's enamelled peaks arise around that inmost one, where ancient eagles on its brink, vast as archangels, gather and drink the sacraments of the sun. And men break out of the northern lands, enormous lands alone, where a spell is laid upon life and lust, and the rain is changed to a silver dust, and the sea to a great green stone. And a shape that moveth murkily in mirrors of ice and night hath blanched with fear all beasts and birds, as death and a shock of evil words blast a man's hair with white. And the cry of the palms and the purple moons, or the cry of the frost and foam, swept ever around an inmost place, and the din of distant race on race cried and replied round Rome. And there was death on the emperor, and night upon the pope, and Alfred, hiding in deep grass, hardened his heart with hope. A sea-folk blinder than the sea broke all about his land, but Alfred up against them bare, and gripped the ground and grasped the air, staggered and strove to stand. He bent them back with spear and spade, with desperate dike and wall, with foemen leaning on his shield, and roaring on him when he reeled, and no help came at all. He broke them with a broken sword a little towards the sea, and for 1 hour of panting peace, ringed with a roar that would not cease, with golden crown and girded fleece, made laws under a tree. The Northmen came about our land, a Christless chivalry, who knew not of the arch or pen, great, beautiful, half-witted men from the sunrise and the sea. Misshapen ships stood on the deep, full of strange gold and fire, and hairy men as huge as sin, with horned heads came wading in through the long low sea mire. Our towns were shaken of tall kings, with scarlet beards like blood. The world turned empty where they trod. They took the kindly cross of God, and cut it up for wood. Their souls were drifting as the sea, and all good towns and lands they only saw with heavy eyes, and broke with heavy hands. Their gods were sadder than the sea, gods of a wandering will, who cried for blood like beasts at night, sadly from hill to hill. They seemed as trees walking the earth, as witless and as tall, yet they took hold upon the heavens, and no help came at all. They bred like birds in English woods, they rooted like the rose, when Alfred came to Athelney, to hide him from their bows. There was not English armour left, nor any English thing, when Alfred came to Athelney, to be an English king. For earthquake swallowing earthquake uprent the Wessex tree. The whirlpool of the pagan sway had swirled his sires as sticks away when a flood smites the sea. And the great kings of Wessex wearied and sank in gore, and even their ghosts in that great stress grew greyer and greyer, less and less, with the lords that died in Lyonnesse, and the king that comes no more. And the god of the golden dragon was dumb upon his throne, and the lord of the golden dragon ran in the woods alone. and if ever he climbed the crest of luck, and set the flag before, returning as a wheel returns, came ruin and the rain that burns, and all began once more. And naught was left King Alfred but shameful tears of rage, in the island, in the river, in the end of all his age. In the island, in the river, he was broken to his knee, and he read, writ with an iron pen, that God had wearied of Wessex men, and given their country, field and fen, to the devils of the sea. And he saw in a tiny picture, tiny and far away, his mother sitting in Egbert's hall, and a book she showed him very small, where a sapphire Mary sat in stall, with a golden Christ at play. It was wrought in the monk's slow manner, from silver and sanguine shell, where the scenes are little and terrible, keyholes of heaven and hell. In the river island of Athelney, with the river running past, in colours of such simple creed, all things sprang at him, sun and weed, till the grass grew to be grass indeed, and the tree was a tree at last. Fearfully plain the flowers grew, like the child's book to read, or like a friend's face seen in a glass. He looked, and there Our Lady was. She stood and stroked the tall live grass, as a man strokes his steed. Her face was like an open word, when brave men speak and choose. The very colours of her coat were better than good news. She spoke not, nor turned not, nor any sign she cast, only she stood up straight and free, between the flowers in Athelney, and the river running past. One dim ancestral jewel hung on his ruined armour grey. He rent and cast it at her feet, where after centuries with slow feet men came from hall and school and street, and found it where it lay. Mother of God, the wanderer said, I am but a common king, nor will I ask what saints may ask, to see a secret thing. The gates of heaven are fearful gates, worse than the gates of hell, nor would I break the splendours barred, or seek to know the things they guard, which is too good to tell. But for this earth most pitiful, this little land I know, if that which is for ever is, or if our hearts should break with bliss, seeing the stranger go. When our last bow is broken, Queen, and our last javelin cast, under some sad green evening sky, holding a ruined cross on high, under warm westland grass to lie, shall we come home at last? And a voice came, human but high up, like a cottage climbed among the clouds, or a serf of hut and croft, that sits by his hovel fire as oft, but hears on his old bare roof aloft a belfry burst in song. The gates of heaven are lightly locked, we do not guard our gain. The heaviest hind may easily come silently and suddenly upon me in a lane, and any little maid that walks in good thoughts apart may break the guard of the three kings, and see the dear and dreadful things I hid within my heart. The meanest man in grey fields gone behind the set of sun heareth between star and other star, through the door of the darkness fallen ajar, the counsel, eldest of things that are, the talk of the three in one. The gates of heaven are lightly locked, we do not guard our gold. Men may uproot where worlds begin, or read the name of the nameless sin, but if he fail, or if he win, to no good man is told. The men of the East may spell the stars, and times and triumphs mark, but the men signed of the cross of Christ go gaily in the dark. The men of the East may search the scrolls for sure fates and fame, but the men that drink the blood of God go singing to their shame. The wise men know what wicked things are written on the sky. They trim sad lamps, they touch sad strings, hearing the heavy purple wings, where the forgotten seraph kings still plot how God shall die. The wise men know all evil things under the twisted trees, where the perverse in pleasure pine, and men are weary of green wine, and sick of crimson seas. But you, and all the kind of Christ, are ignorant and brave, and you have wars you hardly win, and souls you hardly save. I tell you not, for your comfort, yea, naught for your desire, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Night shall be thrice night over you, and heaven an iron cope. Do you have joy without a cause? Yea, faith without a hope? Even as she spoke she was not, nor any word said he. He only heard, still as he stood, under the old knight's nodding hood, the sea-folk breaking down the wood, like a high tide from sea. He only heard the heathen men, whose eyes are blue and bleak, singing about some cruel thing, done by a great and smiling king in daylight on a deck. He only heard the heathen men, whose eyes are blue and blind, singing what shameful things are done between the sunlit sea and the sun, when the land is left behind. End of Book 1. The Ballad of the White Horse, Book 2. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, August 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. Book 2. The Gathering of the Chiefs. Up across windy wastes and up went Alfred over the shaws, shaken of the joy of giants, the joy without a cause. In the slopes away to the western bays, where blows not ever a tree, he washed his soul in the west wind, and his body in the sea. And he set to rhyme his ale measures, and he sang aloud his laws, because of the joy of the giants, the joy without a cause. For the king went gathering Wessex men, as grain out of the chaff, the few that were alive to die, laughing as littered skulls that lie, after lost battles turn to the sky an everlasting laugh. The king went gathering Christian men, as wheat out of the husk, Eldred, the franklin by the sea, and Mark, the man from Italy, and Colin of the sacred tree, from the old tribe on Usk. The rook croaked homeward heavily, the west was clear and warm, the smoke of evening food and ease rose like a blue tree in the trees when he came to Eldred's farm. But Eldred's farm was fallen awry, like an old cripple's bones, and Eldred's tools were red with rust, and on his well was a green crust, and purple thistles upward thrust between the kitchen stones. But smoke of some good feasting went upwards evermore, and Eldred's doors stood wide apart, for loitering foot or labouring cart, and Eldred's great and foolish heart stood open like his door. A mighty man was Eldred, a bulk for casks to fill, his face a dreaming furnace, his body a walking hill. In the old wars of Wessex his sword had sunken deep, but all his friends, he sighed and said, were broken about Ethelred, and between the deep drink and the dead he had fallen upon sleep. Come not to me, King Alfred, save always for the ale. Why should my harmless hinds be slain, because the chiefs cry once again, as in all fights, that we shall gain, and in all fights we fail? Your skalds still thunder and prophesy that crown that never comes. Friend, I will watch the certain things, swine and slow moons like silver rings, and the ripening of the plums. And Alfred answered, drinking, and gravely, without blame, Nor bear I boast of skald or king, the thing I bear is a lesser thing, but comes in a better name. Out of the mouth of the Mother of God, more than the doors of doom, I call the muster of Wessex men, from grassy hamlet or ditch or den, to break and be broken, God knows when, but I have seen for whom. Out of the mouth of the Mother of God, like a little word come I, for I go gathering Christian men, from sunken paving and ford and fen, to die in a battle God knows when, by God but I know why. And this is the word of Mary, the word of the world's desire. No more of comfort shall ye get, save that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Then silence sank, and slowly arose the sea-land lord. Like some vast beast for mystery, he filled the room and porch and sky, and from a cobwebbed nail on high unhooked his heavy sword. Up on the shrill sea downs and up went Alfred all alone, turning but once ere the door was shut, shouting to Eldred over his butt that he bring all spears to the woodman's hut, hewn under Egbert's stone. And he turned his back and broke the fern, and fought the moths of dusk, and went on his way for other friends, friends fallen of all the wide world's ends, from Rome that wrath and pardon sends, and the grey tribes on Usk. He saw gigantic tracks of death, and many a shape of doom, good steadings to grey ashes gone, and a monk's house white like a skeleton in the grey crypt of the combe. And in many a Roman villa earth and her ivies eat, saw coloured pavements sink and fade in flowers, and the windy colonnade like the spectre of a street. But the cold stars clustered among the cold pines, ere he was half on his pilgrimage over the western lines. And the white dawn widened ere he came to the last pine, where Mark, the man from Italy, still made the Christian sign. The long farm lay on the large hillside, flat like a painted plan, and by the side the low white house, where dwelt the Southland man. A bronzed man, with a bird's bright eye, and a strong bird's beak and brow. His skin was brown like buried gold, and of certain of his sires was told that they came in the shining ship of old, with Caesar in the prow. His fruit trees stood like soldiers, drilled in a straight line. His strange stiff olives did not fail, and all the kings of the earth drank ale, but he drank wine. Wide over wasted British plains stood never an arch or dome, only the trees to toss and reel, the tribes to bicker, the beasts to squeal, but the eyes in his head were strong like steel, and his soul remembered Rome. Then Alfred of the lonely spear lifted his lion head, and fronted with the Italian's eye, asking him of his whence and why, King Alfred stood and said, I am that oft-defeated king, whose failure fills the land, who fled before the Danes of old, who chaffered with the Danes with gold, who now upon the Wessex wold hardly has feet to stand. But out of the mouth of the Mother of God I have seen the truth like fire, this, that the sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Long looked the Roman on the land, the trees as golden crowns, blazed drenched with dawn and dew impearled, while faintlier coloured, freshlier curled, the clouds from underneath the world stood up over the downs. These vines be ropes that drag me hard, he said. I go not far. Where would you meet? For you must hold half Wiltshire and the White Horse Wold, and the Thames bank to Owensfold, if Wessex goes to war. Guthrum sits strong on either bank, and you must press his lines, inwards and eastward drive him down. I doubt if you shall take the crown, till you have taken London town. For me, I have the vines. If each man on the judgment day meet God on a plain alone, said Alfred, I will speak for you, as for myself, and call it true, that you brought all fighting folk you knew, lined under Egbert's stone. Though I be in the dust ere then, I know where you will be. And shouldering suddenly his spear, he faded like some elfin fear, where the tall pines ran up, tier on tier, tree over toppling tree. He shouldered his spear at morning, and laughed to lay it on, but he leaned on his spear as on a staff, with might and little mood to laugh, or ever he sighted chick or calf, of Colan of Caerleon. For the man dwelt in a lost land, of boulders and broken men, in a great grey cave far off to south, where a thick green forest stopped the mouth, giving darkness in his den. And the man was come like a shadow, from the shadow of druid trees, where Usk, with mighty murmurings, past Caerleon of the fallen kings, goes out to ghostly seas. Last of a race in ruin, he spoke the speech of the Gaels. His kin were in holy Ireland, or up in the crags of Wales. But his soul stood with his mother's folk, that were of the rain-wrapped isle, where Patrick and Brandon Westerly looked out at last on a landless sea and the sun's last smile. His harp was carved and cunning, as the Celtic craftsman makes, graven all over with twisting shapes like many headless snakes. His harp was carved and cunning, his sword prompt and sharp, and he was gay when he held the sword, sad when he held the harp. For the great Gaels of Ireland are the men that God made mad, for all their wars are merry, and all their songs are sad. He kept the Roman order, he made the Christian sign, but his eyes grew often blind and bright, and the sea that rose in the rocks at night rose to his head like wine. He made the sign of the cross of God, he knew the Roman prayer, but he had unreason in his heart, because of the gods that were. Even they that walked on the high cliffs, high as the clouds were then, gods of unbearable beauty that broke the hearts of men, and whether in seat or saddle, whether with frown or smile, whether at feast or fight was he heard the noise of a nameless sea on an undiscovered isle. Lifting the great green ivy, and the great spear lowering, one said, I am Alfred of Wessex, and I am a conquered king. And the man of the cave made answer, and his eyes were stars of scorn, and better kings were conquered, or ever your sires were born. What goddess was your mother, what fay your breed begot, that you should not die with Uther and Arthur and Lancelot? But when you win you brag and blow, and when you lose you rail. Army of Eastland yokels, not strong enough to fail. I bring not boast or railing, spake Alfred, not in ire. I bring of Our Lady a lesson set, this, that our sky grows darker yet, and the sea rises higher. Then Colan of the sacred tree tossed his black mane on high, and cried as rigidly he rose, And if the sea and sky be foes, we will tame the sea and sky. Smiled Alfred, Seek ye a fable more dizzy and more dread than all your mad barbarian tales where the sky stands on its head? A tale where a man looks down on the sky that has long looked down on him, a tale where a man can swallow a sea that might swallow the seraphim. Bring to the hut by Egbert's stone all bills and bows ye have. And Alfred strode off rapidly, and Colan of the sacred tree went slowly to his cave. End of Book 2. The Ballad of the White Horse, Book 3. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, August 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton, Book 3. The Harp of Alfred. In a tree that yawned and twisted, the king's few goods were flung, a mass-book mildewed, line by line, and weapons and a skin of wine, and an old harp unstrung. By the yawning tree in the twilight, the king unbound his sword, severed the harp of all his goods, and there in the cool and soundless woods sounded a single chord. Then laughed, and watched the finches flash, the sullen flies and swarm, and went unarmed over the hills with a harp upon his arm, until he came to the White Horse Vale, and saw across the plains, in the twilight high and far and fell, like the fiery terraces of hell, the campfires of the Danes, the fires of the great army that was made of iron men, whose lights of sacrilege and scorn ran around England red as morn, fires over Glastonbury Thorn, fires out on Ely Fen. And as he went by White Horse Vale, he saw lie wan and wide the old horse graven, God knows when, by gods or beasts or what things then walked a new world instead of men, and scrawled on the hillside. And when he came to White Horse Down, the great White Horse was grey, for it was ill scoured of the weed, and lichen and thorn could crawl and feed, since the foes of settled house and creed had swept old works away. King Alfred gazed all sorrowful at thistle and mosses grey, till a rally of Danes with shield and bill rolled drunk over the dome of the hill, and hearing of his harp and skill, they dragged him to their play. And as they went through the high green grass, they roared like the great green sea, but when they came to the red campfire, they were silent suddenly. And as they went up the wastes away, they went reeling to and fro, but when they came to the red campfire, they stood all in a row. For golden in the firelight, with a smile carved on his lips, and a beard curled right cunningly, was Guthrum of the northern sea, the emperor of the ships. With 3 great earls King Guthrum went the rounds from fire to fire, with Harold, nephew of the king, and Ogier of the stone and sling, and Elf, whose gold lute had a string that sighed like all desire. The earls of the great army, that no men born could tire, whose flames anear him or aloof took hold of towers or walls of proof, fire over Glastonbury roof, and out on Ely fire. And Guthrum heard the soldier's tale, and bade the stranger play, not harshly, but as one on high, on a marble pillar in the sky, who sees all folk that live and die, pigmy and far away. And Alfred, king of Wessex, looked on his conqueror, and his hands hardened, but he played, and leaving all later hates unsaid, he sang of some old British raid on the wild west march of yore. He sang of war in the warm wet shires, where rain nor fruitage fails, where England of the motley states deepens like a garden to the gates in the purple walls of Wales. He sang of the seas of savage heads, and the seas and seas of spears, boiling all over Offa's dike, what time a Wessex club could strike the kings of the mountaineers, till Harold laughed and snatched the harp, the kinsman of the king, a big youth, beardless like a child, whom the new wine of war sent wild, smote and began to sing. And he cried of the ships as eagles that circle fiercely and fly, and sweep the seas and strike the towns from Cyprus round to Skye. How swiftly and with peril they gather all good things, the high horns of the forest beasts, or the secret stones of kings. For Rome was given to rule the world, and gat of it little joy, but we shall enjoy the world, the whole huge world a toy, great wine like blood from Burgundy, cloaks like the clouds from Tyre, and marble like solid moonlight, and gold like frozen fire, smells that a man might swill in a cup, stones that a man might eat, and the great smooth women like ivory that the Turks sell in the street. He sang the throne of the thief of the world, and the gods that love the thief, and he yelled aloud at the cloister yards, where men go gathering grief. Well have you sung, O stranger, of death on the dike in Wales. Your chief was a bracelet giver, but the red unbroken river of a race runs not for ever, but suddenly it fails. Doubtless your sires were sword-swingers, when they waded fresh from foam, before they were turned to women by the god of the nails from Rome. But since you bent to the shaven men, who neither lust nor smite, thunder of Thor, we hunt you, a hare on the mountain height. King Guthrum smiled a little, and said, It is enough. Nephew, let Elf retune the string. A boy must needs like bellowing, but the old ears of a careful king are glad of songs less rough. Blue-eyed was Elf the minstrel, with womanish hair and ring, yet heavy was his hand on sword, though light upon the string. And as he stirred the strings of the harp, to notes but 4 or 5, the heart of each man moved in him like a babe buried alive. And they felt the land of the folk-songs spread southward of the Dane, and they heard the good Rhine flowing in the heart of all Alamein. They felt the land of the folk-songs, where the gifts hang on the tree, where the girls give ale at morning, and the tears come easily. The mighty people, woman-like, that have pleasure in their pain, as he sang of Balder beautiful, whom the heavens loved in vain. As he sang of Balder beautiful, whom the heavens could not save, till the world was like a sea of tears, and every soul a wave. There is always a thing forgotten, when all the world goes well, a thing forgotten as long ago, when the gods forgot the mistletoe, and soundless as an arrow of snow the arrow of anguish fell. The thing on the blind side of the heart, on the wrong side of the door. The green plant groweth, menacing, almighty lovers in the spring, there is always a forgotten thing, and love is not secure. And all that sat by the fire were sad, save Ogier, who was stern, and his eyes hardened even to stones as he took the harp in turn. Earl Ogier of the stone and sling was odd to ear and sight. Old he was, but his locks were red, and jests were all the words he said, yet he was sad at board and bed, and savage in the fight. You sing of the young gods easily in the days when you are young, but I go smelling yew and sods, and I know there are gods behind the gods, gods that are best unsung. And a man grows ugly for women, and a man grows dull with ale. Well, if he find in his soul at last fury, that does not fail. The wrath of the gods behind the gods, who would rend all gods and men. Well, if the old man's heart hath still wheels sped of rage and roaring will, like cataracts to break down and kill, well for the old man then. While there is one tall shrine to shake, or one live man to rend, for the wrath of the gods behind the gods, who are weary to make an end. There lives one moment for a man when the door at his shoulder shakes, when the taut rope parts under the pull, and the barest branch is beautiful, one moment while it breaks. So rides my soul upon the sea that drinks the howling ships, though in black jest it bows and nods, under the moons with silver rods, I know it is roaring at the gods, waiting the last eclipse. And in the last eclipse the sea shall stand up like a tower, above all moons made dark and riven, hold up its foaming head to heaven, and laugh, knowing its hour. And the high ones in the happy town, propped of the planets 7, shall know a new light in the mind, a noise about them and behind, shall hear an awful voice and find foam in the courts of heaven. And you that sit by the fire are young, and true loves wait for you. But the king and I grow old, and hate alone is true. And Guthrum shook his head but smiled, for he was a mighty clerk, and had read lines in the Latin books when all the north was dark. He said, I am older than you, Ogier. Not all things would I rend, for whether life be bad or good, it is best to abide the end. He took the great harp wearily, even Guthrum of the Danes, with wide eyes bright as the one long day on the long polar plains. For he sang of a wheel returning, and the mire trod back to mire, and how red hells and golden heavens are castles in the fire. It is good to sit where the good tales go, to sit as our fathers sat. But the hour shall come after his youth, when a man shall know not tales but truth, and his heart fail thereat. When he shall read what is written, so plain in clouds and clods, when he shall hunger without hope, even for evil gods. For this is a heavy matter, and the truth is cold to tell. Do we not know, have we not heard, the soul is like a lost bird, the body a broken shell. And a man hopes, being ignorant, till in white woods apart he finds at last the lost bird dead, and a man may still lift up his head, but never more his heart. There comes no noise but weeping out of the ancient sky, and a tear is in the tiniest flower, because the gods must die. The little brooks are very sweet, like a girl's ribbon curled, but the great sea is bitter that washes all the world. Strong are the Roman roses, or the free flowers of the heath, but every flower, like a flower of the sea, smelleth with the salt of death. And the heart of the locked battle is the happiest place for men, where shrieking souls as shafts go by, and many have died, and all may die. Though this word be a mystery, death is most distant then. Death blazes bright above the cup, and clear above the crown, but in that dream of battle we seem to tread it down. Wherefore I am a great king, and waste the world in vain, because man hath not other power, save that in dealing death for dower he may forget it for an hour, to remember it again. And slowly his hands and thoughtfully fell from the lifted lyre, and the owls moaned from the mighty trees, till Alfred caught it to his knees, and smote it as in ire. He heaved the head of the harp on high, and swept the framework barred, and his stroke had all the rattle and spark of horses flying hard. When God put man in a garden, he girt him with a sword, and sent him forth a free knight, that might betray his lord. He brake him, and betrayed him, and fast and far he fell, till you and I may stretch our necks, and burn our beards in hell. But though I lie on the floor of the world, with the 7 sins for rods, I would rather fall with Adam, than rise with all your gods. What have the strong gods given? Where have the glad gods led, when Guthrum sits on a hero's throne, and asks if he is dead? Sirs, I am but a nameless man, a rhymester without home. Yet since I come of the Wessex clay, and carry the cross of Rome, I will even answer the mighty Earl, that asked of Wessex men, why they be meek and monkish folk, and bow to the white lord's broken yoke. What sign have we, save blood and smoke? Here is my answer then. That on you is fallen the shadow, and not upon the name, that though we scatter, and though we fly, and you hang over us like the sky, you are more tired of victory than we are tired of shame. That though you hunt the Christian man, like a hare on the hillside, the hare has still more heart to run than you have heart to ride. That though all lances split on you, all swords be heaved in vain, we have more lust again to lose than you to win again. Your lord sits high in the saddle, a broken-hearted king, but our King Alfred, lost from fame, fallen among foes or bonds of shame, in I know not what mean trade or name, has still some song to sing. Our monks go robed in rain and snow, but the heart of flame therein. But you go clothed in feasts and flames, when all is ice within. Nor shall all iron dooms make dumb men wondering ceaselessly, if it be not better to fast for joy than feast for misery. Nor monkish order only slides down as fields to fen. All things achieved and chosen pass, as the white horse fades in the grass, no work of Christian men. Ere the sad gods that made your gods saw their sad sunrise pass, the white horse of the white horse vale that you have left to darken and fail was cut out of the grass. Therefore your end is on you and your kings, not for a fire in Ely fen, not that your gods are 9 or 10, but because it is only Christian men guard even heathen things. For our God hath blessed creation, calling it good. I know what spirit with whom you blindly band hath blessed destruction with his hand. Yet by God's death the stars shall stand, and the small apples grow. And the king, with harp on shoulder, stood up and ceased his song, and the owls moaned from the mighty trees, and the Danes laughed loud and long. End of Book 3. The Ballad of the White Horse, Book 4. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, October 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. Book 4. The Woman in the Forest. Thick thunder of the snorting swine, enormous in the gloam, rending among all roots that cling, and the wild horses whinnying, were the night's noises when the king, shouldering his harp, went home. With eyes of owl and feet of fox, full of all thoughts he went. He marked the tilt of the pagan camp, the paling of pine, the sentry's tramp, and the one great stolen altar lamp over Guthrum in his tent. By scrub and thorn and Ethandune that night the foe had lain, whence ran across the heather grey the old stones of a Roman way, and in a wood not far away the pale road split in twain. He marked the wood and the cloven ways with an old captain's eyes, and he thought how many a time had he sought to see doom he could not see, how ruin had come, and victory, and both were a surprise. Even so had he watched and wondered under Ashdown from the plains, with Ethelred praying in his tent, till the white hawthorn swung and bent, as Alfred rushed his spears and rent the shield wall of the Danes. Even so had he watched and wondered, knowing neither less nor more, till all his lords lay dying, and axes on axes plying, flung him and drove him flying like a pirate to the shore. Wise he had been before defeat, and wise before success, wise in both hours, and ignorant, knowing neither more nor less. As he went down to the river hut, he knew a nightshade scent. Owls did as evil cherubs rise, with little wings and lantern eyes, as though he sank through the underskies, but down and down he went. As he went down to the river hut, he went as one that fell, seeing the high forest domes and spars, dim green or torn with golden scars, as the proud look up at the evil stars in the red heavens of hell. For he must meet by the river hut them he had bidden to arm, Mark from the towers of Italy, and Colan of the sacred tree, and Eldred who beside the sea held heavily his farm. The roof leaned gaping to the grass, as a monstrous mushroom lies. Echoing and empty seemed the place, but opened in a little space a great grey woman with scarred face and strong and humbled eyes. King Alfred was but a meagre man, bright-eyed but lean and pale, and swordless. With his harp and rags he seemed a beggar such as lags looking for crusts and ale. And the woman, with a woman's eyes of pity at once and ire, said, when that she had glared a span, "There is a cake for any man if he will watch the fire." And Alfred, bowing heavily, sat down the fire to stir, and even as the woman pitied him, so did he pity her, saying, "O great heart in the night, O best cast forth for worst, twilight shall melt and morning stir, and no kind thing shall come to her, till God shall turn the world over, and all the last are first. And well may God with the serving folk cast in his dreadful lot. Is not he too a servant, and is not he forgot? For was not God my gardener, and silent like a slave, that opened oaks on the uplands, or thicket in graveyard gave? And was not God my armourer, all patient and unpaid, that sealed my skull as a helmet, and ribs for hauberk made? Did not a great grey servant of all my sires and me build this pavilion of the pines, and herd the fowls and fill the vines, and labour and pass and leave no signs, save mercy and mystery? For God is a great servant, and rose before the day, from some primordial slumber torn, but all we living later born sleep on and rise after the morn, and the Lord has gone away. On things half sprung from sleeping, all sleepy suns have shone. They stretch stiff arms, the yawning trees, the beasts blink upon hands and knees. Man is awake and does and sees, but heaven has done and gone. For who shall guess the good riddle, or speak of the holiest, save in faint figures and failing words? Who loves, yet laughs among the swords, labours and is at rest? But some see God like Guthrum, crowned with a great beard curled, but I see God like a good giant, that labouring lifts the world. Wherefore was God in Golgotha, slain as a serf is slain, and hate he had of prince and peer, and love he had, and made good cheer, of them that, like this woman here, go powerfully in pain. But in this grey morn of man's life cometh sometime to the mind a little light that leaps and flies like a star blown on the wind. A star of nowhere, a nameless star, a light that spins and swirls, and cries that even in hedge and hill, even on earth it may go ill at last with the evil earls. A dancing sparkle, a doubtful star, on the waste wind whirled and driven, but it seems to sing of a wilder worth, a time discrowned of doom and birth, and the kingdom of the poor on earth come as it is in heaven. But even though such days endure, how shall it profit her, who shall go mourning to the grave, with many a meek and mighty slave, field-breaker and fisher on the wave, and woodman and waggoner? Bake ye the big world all again, a cake with kinder leaven, yet these are sorry evermore, unless there be a little door a little door in heaven. And as he wept for the woman, he let her business be, and like his royal oath and rash, the good food fell upon the ash and blackened instantly. Screaming, the woman caught a cake yet burning from the bar, and struck him suddenly on the face, leaving a scarlet scar. King Alfred stood up wordless, a man dead with surprise, and torture stood, and the evil things that are in the childish hearts of kings an instant in his eyes. And even as he stood and stared, drew round him in the dusk those friends creeping from far-off farms, Marcus with all his slaves in arms, and the strange spears hung with ancient charms of Colin of the Usk. With one whole farm marching afoot, the trampled road resounds, farm-hands and farm-beasts blundering by, and jars of mead and stores of rye, where Eldred strode above his high and thunder-throated hounds. And grey cattle and silver lowed against the unlifted morn, and straw clung to the spear shafts tall, and a boy went before them all, blowing a ram's horn. As mocking such rude revelry, the dim clan of the Gael came like a bad king's burial end, with dismal robes that drop and rend, and demon pipes that wail, in long outlandish garments, torn, though of antique worth, with druid beards and druid spears, as a resurrected race appears out of an elder earth. And though the king had called them forth, and knew them for his own, so still each eye stood like a gem, so spectral hung each broidered hem, grey carven men he fancied them, hewn in an age of stone. And the two wild peoples of the north stood fronting in the gloam, and heard and knew each in its mind the third great thunder on the wind, the living walls that hedge mankind, the walking walls of Rome. Marks were the mixed tribes of the west, of many a hue and strain, Gurth with rank hair like yellow grass, and the Cornish fisher, Gorlias, and Halmer come from his first mass, lately baptized, a Dane. But like one man in armour, those hundreds trod the field. From red Arabia to the Tyne, the earth had heard that marching line, since the cry on the hill Capitoline, and the fall of the golden shield. And the earth shook, and the king stood still under the greenwood bough, and the smoking cake lay at his feet, and the blow was on his brow. Then Alfred laughed out suddenly, like thunder in the spring, till shook aloud the lintel beams, and the squirrels stirred in dusty dreams, and the startled birds went up in streams for the laughter of the king. The giant laughter of Christian men, that roars through 1,000 tales, where greed is an ape, and pride is an ass, and Jack's away with his master's lass, and the miser is banged with all his brass, the farmer with all his flails. Tales that tumble, and tales that trick, yet end not all in scorning, of kings and clowns in a merry plight, and the clock gone wrong, and the world gone right, that the mummers sing upon Christmas night, and Christmas day in the morning. Now here is a good warrant, cried Alfred, by my sword, for he that is struck for an ill servant should be a kind lord. He that has been a servant knows more than priests and kings, but he that has been an ill servant, he knows all earthly things. Pride flings frail palaces at the sky, as a man flings up sand, but the firm feet of humility take hold of heavy land. Pride juggles with her toppling towers, they strike the sun and cease, but the firm feet of humility, they grip the ground like trees. He that hath failed in a little thing hath a sign upon his brow, and the earls of the great army have no such seal to show. The red print on my forehead, small flame for a red star, in the van of the violent marching, then, when the sky is torn of the trumpets 10, and the hands of the happy howling men fling wide the gates of war. This blow that I return not, 10 times will I return, on kings and earls of all degree, and armies, wide as empires be, shall slide like landslips to the sea, if the red star burn. One man shall drive 100, as the dead kings drave. Before me rocking hosts be riven, and battering cohorts backward driven, for I am the first king known of heaven that has been struck like a slave. Up on the old white road, brothers, up on the Roman walls, for this is the night of the drawing of swords, and the tainted tower of the heathen hordes leans to our hammers, fires, and cords, leans a little and falls. Follow the star that lives and leaps, follow the sword that sings, for we go gathering heathen men, a terrible harvest, 10 by 10, as the wrath of the last red autumn, then, when Christ reaps down the kings. Follow a light that leaps and spins, follow the fire unfurled, for riseth up against realm and rod a thing forgotten, a thing downtrod. The last lost giant, even God, is risen against the world. Roaring they went o'er the Roman wall, and roaring up the lane. Their torches tossed a ladder of fire, higher their hymn was heard, and higher, more sweet for hate and for heart's desire, and up in the northern scrub and briar they fell upon the Dane. End of Book 4. The Ballad of the White Horse, Book 5. This is a LibriVox recording. All LibriVox recordings are in the public domain. For more information, or to volunteer, visit LibriVox.org. Read by Joshua Christensen, October 2007. The Ballad of the White Horse by G.K. Chesterton. Book 5. Ethandune, the First Stroke. King Guthrum was a dread king, like death out of the north. Shrines without name or number he rent and rolled as lumber. From Chester to the Humber he drove his foemen forth. The Roman villas heard him in the valley of the Thames, come over the hills roaring above their roofs, and pouring on spire and stair and flooring brimstone and pitch and flames. Sheer o'er the great chalk uplands and the hill of the Horse went he, till high on Hampshire beacons he saw the southern sea. High on the heights of Wessex he saw the southern brine, and turned him to a conquered land, and where the northern thornwoods stand, and the road parts on either hand, there came to him a sign. King Guthrum was a war chief, a wise man in the field, and though he prospered well, and knew how Alfred's folk were sad and few, not less with weighty care he drew long lines for pike and shield. King Guthrum lay on the upper land, on a single road at gaze, and his foe must come with lean array up the left arm of the cloven way to the meeting of the ways. And long ere the noise of armour, an hour ere the break of light, the woods awoke with crash and cry, and the birds sprang clamouring harsh and high, and the rabbits ran like an elves' army ere Alfred came in sight. The live wood came at Guthrum, on foot and claw and wing. The nests were noisy overhead, for Alfred and the Star of Red, all life went forth, and the forest fled before the face of the king. But halted in the woodways, Christ's few were grim and grey, and each with a small far bird-like sight saw the high folly of the fight, and though strange joys had grown in the night, despair grew with the day. And when white dawn crawled through the wood, like cold foam of a flood, then weakened every warrior's mood, in hope, though not in hardihood, and each man sorrowed as he stood in the fashion of his blood. For the Saxon franklin sorrowed, for the things that had been fair, for the dear dead woman crimson-clad, and the great feasts and the friends he had, but the Celtic prince's soul was sad for the things that never were. In the eyes Italian all things but a black laughter died, and Alfred flung his shield to earth, and smote his breast, and cried, I wronged a man to his slaying, and a woman to her shame, and once I looked on a sworn maid that was wed to the holy name, and once I took my neighbour's wife that was bound to an Eastland man, in the starkness of my evil youth, before my griefs began. People, if you have any prayers, say prayers for me, and lay me under a Christian stone in that lost land I thought my own, to wait till the holy horn is blown, and all poor men are free. Then Eldred of the idle farm leaned on his ancient sword, as fell his heavy words and few, and his eyes were of such alien blue, as gleams where the Northman saileth new into an unknown fjord. I was a fool and wasted ale, My slaves found it sweet. I was a fool and wasted bread, and the birds had bread to eat. The kings go up and the kings go down, and who knows who shall rule? Next night a king may starve or sleep, but men and birds and beasts shall weep at the burial of a fool. O drunkards in my cellar, boys in my apple tree, the world grows stern and strange and new, and wise men shall govern you, and you shall weep for me. But yoke me my own oxen down to my own farm. My own dog will whine for me, my own friends will bend the knee, and the foes I slew openly have never wished me harm. And all were moved a little, but Colin stood apart, having first pity, and after, hearing like rat in rafter that little worm of laughter that eats the Irish heart. And his grey-green eyes were cruel, and the smile of his mouth waxed hard. And he said, And when did Britain become your burying yard? Before the Romans lit the land, when schools and monks were none, we reared such stones to the sun-god as might put out the sun. The tall trees of Britain we worshipped, and were wise, but you shall raid the whole land through, and never a tree shall talk to you, though every leaf is a tongue taught true, and the forest is full of eyes. On one round hill to the seaward, the trees grow tall and grey, and the trees talk together when all men are away. Or a few round hills forgotten, the trees grow tall in rings, and the trees talk together of many pagan things. Yet I could lie and listen with a cross upon my clay, and hear unhurt forever what the trees of Britain say. A proud man was the Roman, his speech a single one, but his eyes were like an eagle's eyes that is staring at the sun. Dig for me where I die, he said, if first or last I fall, dead on the fell at the first charge, or dead by Wantage wall. Lift not my head from bloody ground, bear not my body home, for all the earth is Roman earth, and I shall die in Rome. Then Alfred, King of England, bade blow the horns of war, and fling the golden dragon out, with crackle and acclaim and shout, scrolled in a flame and far. And under the golden dragon went Wessex all along, past the sharp point of the cloven ways, out from the black wood into the blaze of sun and steel and song. And when they came to the open land, they wheeled, deployed, and stood. Midmost were Marcus and the king, and Eldred on the right-hand wing, and leftwards Colin darkling in the last shade of the wood. But the earls of the great army lay like a long half-moon, 10 poles before their palisades, with wide-winged helms and runic blades, red giants of an age of raids in the thornland of Ethandune. Midmost the saddles rose and swayed, and a stir of horses' manes, where Guthrum and a few rode high on horses seized in victory, but Ogier went on foot to die in the old way of the Danes. Far to the king's left Elf the bard led on the eastern wing, with songs and spells that change the blood, and on the king's right Harold stood, the kinsman of the king. Young Harold, coarse, with colours gay, smoking with oil and musk, and the pleasant violence of the young, pushed through his people, giving tongue, forwards where, grey as cobwebs hung, the banners of the Usk. But as he came before his line a little space along, his beardless face broke into mirth, and he cried, What broken bits of earth are here? For what their clothes are worth, I would sell them for a song. For Colin was hung with raiment, tattered like autumn leaves, and his men were all as thin as saints, and all as poor as thieves. No bows, nor slings, nor bolts they bore, but bills and pikes ill-made, and none but Colin bore a sword, and rusty was its blade. And Colin's eyes with mystery and iron laughter stirred, and he spoke aloud, but lightly, not labouring to be heard. Oh, truly we be broken hearts, for that cause, it is said, we light our candles to that lord that broke himself for bread. But though we hold but bitterly what land the Saxon leaves, though Ireland be but a land of saints, and Wales a land of... I say you yet shall weary of the working of your sword. Stricken spirits never strike, nor lean hands hold a sword. And if ever you ride in Ireland, the jest may yet be said, There is the land of broken hearts and the land of broken heads. Not less barbarian laughter choked Harold like a flood. And shall I fight with scarecrows that am of Guthrum's blood? Meeting may be of war men, where the best war man wins, but all this carrion a man shoots before the fight begins. And stopping in his onward strides, he snatched a bow in scorn from some mean slave, and bent it on Colin, whose doom grew dark and shone stars evil over Caerleon in the place where he was born. For Colin had not bow nor sling, on a lonely sword leaned he, like Arthur on Excalibur in the battle by the sea. To his great gold earring Harold tugged back the feathered tail, and swift had sprung the arrow, but swifter sprang the gale. Whirling the one sword round his head, a great wheel in the sun, he sent it splendid through the sky, flying before the shaft could fly. It smote Earl Harold over the eye, and blood began to run. Colin stood bare and weaponless. Earl Harold, as in pain, strove for a smile, put hand to head, stumbled, and suddenly fell dead, and the small white daisies all waxed red with blood out of his brain. And all at that marvel of the sword, cast like a stone to slay, cried out, said Alfred, who would see signs must give all things, verily, man shall not taste of victory till he throws his sword away. Then Alfred, Prince of England, and all the Christian earls, unhooked their swords and held them up, each offered to Colin like a cup of chrysolite and pearls. And the king said, Do thou take my sword, who have done this deed of fire. For this is the manner of Christian men, whether of steel or priestly pen, that they cast their hearts out of their ken to get their heart's desire. And whether ye swear a hive of monks, or one fair wife to friend, this is the manner of Christian men, that their oath endures the end. For love, our Lord, at the end of the world, sits a red horse like a throne, with a brazen bow, but one arrow alone. Love, with the shield of the broken heart, ever his bow doth baft for a single prize, and the ultimate bolt that parts and flies comes with a thunder of split skies and a sound of that rend. So shall you earn a king's sword, who cast your sword away. And the king took, with a random eye, a rude axe from a hind hard by, and turned him to the fray. For the swords of the earls of Daneland flamed round the fallen lord. The first blood woke the trumpet tune, as in monk's rhyme or beginneth the battle of Ethandune, with the throwing of the sword. Sanguine sunset, his shoulder a Wessex down, his hands like a windy hammer stroke, men could not count the crests he broke, so fast the crests went down. As the tall white devil of the plague moves out of Asian sky,